Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're starting our Big Ten football predictions today, and our first team is led by a very experienced quarterback and one of the greatest head coaches of all time, making them a real threat for the college football playoff. They are the Ohio State Buckeyes. It was no surprise last season that Ohio State made the playoff, but it was a surprise that they lost 31-0 to Clemson in the playoff semifinal. But this season they're hoping to bounce back. They do return 15 starters, and I do expect them to have a very promising season. Last year they did go 11-2, the one loss to Clemson and the other to Penn State right in the middle of the season. But that didn't derail them. They won out after that and ended up playing in the college football playoff. So this season, let's see how they're going to do. They returned J.T. Barrett at quarterback, one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the Big Ten in my opinion. He's finally a senior. A little over 1,000 yards this season will break the record for Ohio State most passing yards. So this should be a promising season for the Buckeyes. Experience with Urban Meyer, hoping to bounce back and make another playoff appearance. Let's see how they're going to do. They open up at Indiana. Now, if you remember last year, it was a very big offseason story. Indiana fired their head coach, Kevin Wilson. There were some player troubles going on there. So he was mistreating the players. It's a very complicated situation. But then Ohio State picked up Kevin Wilson, and he is now the Buckeyes' offensive coordinator. So they're opening up the season at Indiana, Kevin Wilson's former school where he was head coach. So this will kind of have some bad blood there between Indiana and Ohio State. This will be a fun one to watch. It's on the first Thursday of college football on August 31st, and it's a Big Ten showdown. I mean, first week of the season, they're playing a Big Ten conference game. So this is no pushover game for either of these teams. Richard Lagoa, Indiana, one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten, if you ask me. He could give this Buckeye defense some problems early on, but in the end, I think Ohio State will end up figuring it out. They're going to end up pulling off the win at Indiana. It would not surprise me, though, if this game was close. It would not surprise me if the Hoosiers keep this game close to Ohio State. It's the first game of the season. Everybody's going to be having some troubles because this is the first real game experience either of these teams has had. But I do think Ohio State will ultimately get the win. And then right after that, they get another tough opponent in Oklahoma. Last season, Ohio State went on the road and just destroyed Oklahoma. I was not expecting that. With Baker Mayfield and what Oklahoma had last year, I thought they were going to at least give the Buckeyes a much tougher challenge, especially since it was in Oklahoma. This year, Ohio State gets them at home. Be a very fun game to watch between J.T. Barrett and Baker Mayfield. But I don't know how Oklahoma's going to handle the situation after Bob Stoops left. With it being on the road, I don't like Oklahoma's chances. I'm going to give Ohio State another win. And then Army, a team that you saw in my independent video that I'm very high on this season. I think they're going to do pretty well, but take a little bit of a step back. Ahmad Bradshaw at quarterback, very good dual-threat quarterback. But in the end, Army's not going to be able to challenge Ohio State. And I think we all know that. And then UNLV also, no cupcake team. It's not an FCS opponent, but I don't think UNLV will be able to challenge the Buckeyes. So really, the schedule does get a little easier after those first two games, but Ohio State needs to be very careful not to slip up at Indiana or Oklahoma. I don't think they will. But both those teams have very good quarterbacks, and Ohio State should have a pretty solid defense with 7 returning starters on defense, but they do need to be careful there and hopefully not lose one of those. And then they do start official Big Ten play, with the exception of the Indiana game, at Rutgers, which is a team that's really struggled since they've joined the Big Ten. They really haven't been able to meet expectations like they thought they were going to once they joined the Big Ten, but with it being on the road, I really don't see that being a big deal. I think Ohio State will be able to go on the road and take easy care of Rutgers in that one. And then they face Maryland, a team who actually made a bowl game last season, but they usually struggle in the Big Ten. Usually every other year they make a bowl game, but they always hover around that 6-win mark, never really a true competitor. More of a basketball school if you ask me. So Ohio State does catch a break getting the bottom 2 teams in the East back-to-back here. I think they get the win over Maryland as well. These 2 teams will more than likely be the bottom 2 teams in the Big Ten East. They're just never really too competitive, especially with the Rutgers. I really don't think they're going to be in for another good year. I don't think that move was good for them. And then at Nebraska, if you remember last year, Nebraska was very highly ranked for the majority of the season, but then they had a bunch of injuries. And Ohio State just ended up annihilating the Cornhuskers in this one. With it being at Nebraska, I think Nebraska will be a little bit better. I think Nebraska would have given them a better challenge last year had they not dealt with all those quarterback injuries. But this year, with it being on the road and with Nebraska not having as much talent as they had last year, I think Ohio State will get the win as well over the Cornhuskers. Will be a lot closer than that blowout win they had last year, though. That was just terrible. And then bye week going into Penn State game, probably their biggest game of the season if you ask me. If you remember last year, Penn State upset Ohio State. It was at Penn State, though, but that was really what got Penn State their start. That was what really brought them into the national spotlight, and they kept winning after that and got to the Rose Bowl. So This season, Ohio State gets them at home, which is going to be huge. Penn State is really, if you ask me, Ohio State's biggest competitor in the Big Ten East. Tracy McSorley and Saquon Barkley, quarterback and running back. So this is going to be a really fun one to watch. This is going to be a very exciting game. It really has playoff implications and Big Ten East division implications. So it's going to be really fun to watch. Very exciting game. In the end, though, this game is going to be at Ohio State, and I think that's going to play a huge factor. A lot of factors contribute to this, though. I think Ohio State's more experienced. It's at home. You have a little bit of revenge tied in there. They're coming off a bye week. So a lot of those factors all contribute to Ohio State, actually help them. And I'm going to give them the win over the Nittany Lions there. But that is going to be Ohio State's biggest game, if you ask me. And then at Iowa, no pushover team, though. Let me tell you this. Iowa is a team Ohio State needs to be careful with. If you remember last year, Michigan lost to Iowa late in the season, and it was at Iowa as well. So it's not an easy place to play. But Iowa, though, they lost some people last year as well, lost their quarterback. And even though it's on the road, I think Ohio State's going to be high off that win over Penn State. I think they're going to go on the road and win at Iowa. This could potentially be a trap game for them with it being on the road. It's a very tough place to play, so they don't need to overlook that game. But in the end, I think they're going to get the win over the Hawkeyes. And then Michigan State and Illinois, both teams that struggled last year. Michigan State, I think, will improve this season. Mark D'Antonio doesn't really fool around. He will make sure that the Spartans bounce back after that terrible season they had last year. And then Illinois always is pretty pitiful as well. No offense to the Fighting Illini there, but I think Michigan State and Illinois will both be wins for Ohio State. Should handle them pretty easily. Not really concerned with either of those. And with them both being at home, not really too concerned. Out of those two games, Michigan State will be the biggest challenge by far. And then they face Michigan in the game. Who can forget that epic matchup they had last year between Ohio State and Michigan? The winner was more than likely going to the college football playoff. Ohio State had that game at home, and they won that game 30-27 in double overtime. It was probably one of the better games in this historic series here. This year it's at Michigan, but Michigan only returns 5 starters, 4 on offense and 1 on defense. So I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back since they've been under Jim Harbaugh. It's not going to be a horrible season for the Wolverines, but it's not going to be like they've been used to going to the Orange Bowl, beating up on Florida and the Citrus Bowl and all that good stuff. So, but with it being at Michigan, that poses a little bit of a threat. Usually Michigan and Ohio State always play great against each other no matter how they've been playing throughout the season. And with it being at the Big House, this is no pushover game for the Buckeyes. They do need to be careful with this. And being 11-0 going into this game, a loss here could potentially throw them out of the college football playoff discussion. But I have faith in the Buckeyes this season. I think Michigan, like I said, is not going to have a horrible year, but they're not very experienced. I'm a little concerned about that. Harbaugh will have them ready, but I don't think they're going to have them ready enough to defeat the Buckeyes. And I'm going to give the win to Ohio State. And that gives us our first undefeated team since we've started these predictions. I have Ohio State going 12-0 this season, winning their division in the Big Ten, and obviously playing in the Big Ten championship against whoever you'll see when I predict the Big Ten West. But this is going to be a very exciting year for the Buckeyes. They have a lot of potential. They have a great shot at making the college football playoff again and being potential national title contenders as well. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But the schedule really is favorable for Ohio State once they can get over those first 2 games. And really that Oklahoma game is their toughest non-conference game, of course. But the schedule works out. Their bigger games are at home with the exception of Michigan. So I think this is going to be a really good season for the Ohio State Buckeyes. So please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to share our videos as well. We're going to continue our Power 5 predictions. We got the Big Ten, and then obviously after the Big Ten will be the Big 12 because that's our last Power 5 conference. So please stay tuned, and we'll see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.